Yeah, I would say have a clear understanding of who your users and customers are. It's really interesting because sometimes people think they have a solution. They haven't fully embodied the mindset and the problem from the perspective of who they want their users to be. So really think through that individual's experience and try and solve their problems in whatever way you can. Like you don't have to start from doing it in the most automated way and in the way that the product is actually going to be in the long term. Even, like Google Sheets, like do low code options to solve the problem so you can get a true understanding of what specifically is delivering value to that customer. So get your hands dirty and actually try things out before you go and start pitching a solution.
Hello, welcome to another exciting episode of the Dre and Smiley, the Inner Circle podcast.
So, Smiley, today's the guest I'm really excited about. I think you will be as well for a number of different reasons. This guest has a background in inclusive economic development, AI, fintech. She's worked with SoftBank's Opportunity Fund. And here's where I know your eyes are going to light up. She has a background working with venture capital and emerging technologies, among many other areas. So today's guest is Jennifer Baez. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. So excited to be here.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll build from there.
Sure. So I was born and raised in Miami. I think that's an important part of my story because, we have a lot of character down here in South Florida. And I'm also first generation American. So my family's from Dominican Republic. And I would say from a young age, the ability to work hard to generate opportunities was definitely ingrained in my mindset, just seeing my parents do the same, coming here and making a life for themselves. And from growing up here, I decided to go to UVA for college. And that really exposed me to different career pathways. I went in thinking I was going to do medicine and pivoted to business after attending a social entrepreneurship seminar. And from there, I got a master's in global commerce and lived in China and Spain for a little bit. And that really opened up my eyes to the power of logistics and just getting things from point A to point B. Because learning about global business while living in China really highlights the importance of high-end manufacturing and how that moves the global economy. So that kind of led me to go work at DHL, and I was part of the in-house consulting team and led a lot of strategic engagements around supply chain redesign and product rollouts and things like that. Then 2020 happened, and I was thinking a little bit like, where do I go from having this strategic toolkit and wanting to be a little bit closer to impact on the people side? And at the same time that I was having those thoughts, Miami Tech was emerging as a movement. And being based here, I had the ability to meet people that were in the venture space, in the tech space, that were founders or investors, et cetera. And through that engagement, I ended up joining SoftBank as Opportunity Fund was being rolled out. And I was able to support a portfolio of 75 plus startups. And I was on the team that was helping post-investment. So driving a lot of go-to-market support, pitch feedback, helping them secure funding, et cetera. And then from there, I'm now the chief of staff for the Innovation Economic Development team under Mayor Levine Cava. So really thinking about balancing economic growth with economic opportunity to make sure that all of our residents have access to the growth that we've experienced here in Miami.
Wow. So, Jenn, a couple of things stand out to me. You mentioned Miami and how rich the culture is down there, that type of thing. The first time I went to Miami, what stood out is that it's so vibrant. I mean, cultures, whether it's Haitian, Dominican, Puerto Rican, Cuban, you don't feel like you are in Florida. You feel like you're in a melting, right? It's like a melting pot of all these, hardworking people that are so filled with pride. And the food is amazing. But Miami is a place I would love to call home, but unfortunately I can't afford it. So just wanted to share that. You've also done a lot in your short life. I mean, You've lived in China. You've worked at a number of different companies, one of which was SoftBank, and you mentioned their opportunity fund. So talk about that opportunity fund and the impact you left there and the impact that fund had on you as well in terms of your career.
Yeah, definitely. I think, so one of the founders of that fund is Marcelo Clare. So he's one of the biggest Hispanic startup founders in the US. And he was really passionate about driving opportunity in the space, just given his experience raising capital and then becoming a successful entrepreneur. So that was really important in terms of the leadership. And that was why, I decided to join the fund. And what I was able to deliver for the founders there was really systems and structures and playbooks that you can repeat to drive outcomes. So when you're thinking about venture, it's really a numbers game. Like the more shots you throw out the board, the more likely that you're going to succeed. A lot of the founders we had, it was already their second or third try at becoming a successful business leader. So I was able to bring a lot of the thinking that I developed in management consulting into the space and just helping them think through from having an idea to actually executing through structured processes, especially on the sales side. There was a couple interesting engagements I did of just helping our founders develop funnels that would actually lead to generating revenue from their customers, because there's, a playbook that you can develop and research that you can bring in to like A/B testing and, going through different price points and really evaluating what makes sense for your particular business.
That's so fascinating. And I want to get into, when you look at raising capital, with your experience being in China, Nihai Mao, what would you say? What would you say was the entrepreneurial climate from China, which is a totally opposite side of the political spectrum as the U.S., as it is in raising capital in, say, Miami or in the U.S.? Is the entrepreneurs, because it seemed like they have their own sort of entrepreneurs with the Alibaba and the different things Baidu, but is that climate drastically different as it is to the U.S., their entrepreneurial side with the VC funding, or is it similar?
That's a great question. I would say there are some things that are similar and there are some things that are different, right? So on the similarity side, like the clout really matters. A lot of deals and a lot of intros happen behind closed doors, and the warm intros is still definitely prevalent in both markets. In China, they have something interesting called guanxi. So it's kind of like your social perception and your families. So the way you're perceived and the way your family is perceived is called guanxi. So when you do things that are, well regarded, it increases your guanxi, and then vice versa. But the way that's understood is not as explicit as in the US, right? Like in our market, people have Instagram and Twitter followers, and they're like out there in conferences and podcasts. But in China, it's a little bit more hush hush, like the who's who, based on your actual like social and family ties, and obviously your relationship to the CCP and their interests. So I would say the importance of having social standing is definitely there in both markets. But the difference really comes down to our politics to some extent, like how aligned you are with your respective governments. Like in the US, that's not as make or break as in China. And another thing I saw is there's a lot of global players, right? So like Sequoia, for example, they're operating heavily across both markets. So a lot of the VCs that really drove the major investments are operating in both markets, and you kind of have to be to drive returns in the long term.
So let's say there's a founder or someone with a great idea. We had a podcast, someone with this young man, and he was trying to develop a blockchain technology. But let's say for our listeners, and they're like, okay, I'm a founder, I have a great company. What would be the top 3 things they need to do before they even approach you? Like a lot of times people say, well, when I look at it, you can either have a great idea, a great product, or a great platform, but you lack sales or you lack the development. It's like you need all three of these things to work harmoniously to be successful because it's so competitive in this bringing something from ideation or idea to production. From your experience, what would you say is the top three fundamental things they would need before they approach a venture capitalist like yourself?
Yeah, I would say have a clear understanding of who your users and customers are. It's really interesting because sometimes people think they have a solution. They haven't fully embodied the mindset and the problem from the perspective of who they want their users to be. So really think through that individual's experience and try and solve their problems in whatever way you can. Like you don't have to start from doing it in the most automated way and in the way that the product is actually going to be in the long term. Even, like Google Sheets, like do low code options to solve the problem so you can get a true understanding of what specifically is delivering value to that customer. So get your hands dirty and actually try things out before you go and start pitching a solution. So you actually have a little bit of experience to say that you know exactly how to drive value. Secondly is scan the market. So know very well, like who are your competitors and what are the other options people are using to solve whatever problem you're trying to address. And thirdly is do a little bit of research about who you're talking to and what their past investments are or where their mindset is currently at. We're at a good place right now where we have a lot of exposure to what people are doing, what they're thinking, whether they're posting on LinkedIn, Twitter, or any public appearances. And I've seen discussions go really well where when you're able to contextualize what you're doing and what you're building with what that individual organization is already trying to do, because it just synergizes the conversation a little better.
Yeah, I love that. Jenn, talk to me about your mentors. Who's helped you along the way in this path you're on?
That's a great question. I would say, I have really good friends. So a lot of my peers are just people I've had great experiences with, have been amazing thought partners. I was able to do a program called Semester at Sea while I was at the University of Virginia. And through that program, I lived abroad on a cruise ship for a semester. So that's why it's called Semester at Sea. And there's like two people in particular I met in that program. And we got really close, just like, traveling to different countries. And they've been great thought partners when I've been at different crossroad moments, like trying to decide what to do. So just people that I could really connect authentically to and unpack like what I'm trying to understand in order to make a decision. So good friends are super important. And then two of the individuals that have been my managers as well in specific roles are also people I really admire and have helped me grow and continue to learn and also assess opportunities as they come. So friends and bosses have been great mentors.
Excellent. Excellent. And the reason I'm asking these questions is, a lot of our listeners, they glean a lot from the different guests that we have in terms of, oh, I could be there. I could be there too, right? How did this person arrive there? What challenges did they face? How do they overcome them? So with that in mind, talk to me about some of the challenges that you faced in this journey and how you overcame them.
Yeah, I would say, so one of the things I'm the most proud of that I've done is actually going to college on a full ride. Because what I had to go through the 4 years preceding that is still like the most difficult years I've had to overcome so far. So, I come from a big family. I have 6 sisters, and my family had started a real estate business that was doing pretty well up until the recession. So that kind of led to a really tumultuous period of financial instability. And, I was going to private school and having to commute an hour from Miami closer to Fort Lauderdale, while also like facing periods of being homeless and, just a lot of instability given the recession and some of the decisions my family had to make. And in those moments of, being an overachiever academically and wanting to do so well in school, but then having to overcome so many like daily barriers of like, where am I going to sleep today? Where am I going to, get access to the internet or, environment that I need to do the homework for my 5 AP classes, and having to like really garner the mental and physical strength sometimes to just like sit there and focus. I'm super proud that I was able to do that, but it was what helped me through those periods was having a vision for being in a position where I could really drive change. So I've always been focused on driving impact. That's why I thought I wanted to be a doctor initially. And I knew that if I just like made it to another day and focus on doing my best, that I would be at a point where I could leverage my interests and my energy towards actually driving an impact. So staying focused on what you're trying to accomplish is super helpful to just get out of the shitty moments that life offers sometimes.
I think that is so inspirational, because when you were sitting here, or when you were talking about you were in a semester abroad at University of Virginia, you were living in China, you worked at DHL, you mentioned Sequoia Fund. I'm like, man, she must have lived a private school privileged life all through this. And it's like, man, did she have any problems? And now it's reality hits, which is so amazing, because everyone has a backstory. So I want to thank you for sharing your backstory with us. But the one thing is, going back to the venture capitalists, for some of our our listeners, you define the difference between Series A's, friend and family, private equity, venture capitalists, and why it's important. Because a lot of times in the certain communities, they don't even know venture capitalists exist. They don't even, it's such a small world that they're just thinking they only have the banks. They don't realize that they can raise capital. So from your perspective of dealing with businesses of all over and different communities, could you just define that and why it's important?
Yeah, that's a great question, because it's really important to understand the capital landscape and who you want to go to get money in order to, fund your business. And there's a range of the type of business you want to be, right? Like if you want to be a small business and have a brick and mortar location, that is a different capital stack than if you want to be, tech-based and like grow really big. So first things first, what is the vision of your business in the next 10 years? And from there, you could then unpack like what's the best resource capital-wise. From the venture capital perspective, you have to have the vision from the beginning to get to dominate a market, right? And to generate a lot of revenue. That's like the main driver with venture capital, right? It's like, to what extent do I believe that you're going to generate large returns by gaining a significant share of the market? And if that's not the vision you have for the business, then definitely VC wouldn't be the best option. Because there are, especially now, banks are getting creative with the types of loan offerings that they have. You can get low interest loans as a small business, et cetera. But from the VC perspective is really thinking through the 10-year roadmap, because that's generally how long it takes to either go public or to get bought. Think through that 10-year roadmap and whether you really want to go through the process of raising additional rounds of funding and potentially going public or potentially finding a buyer. Because if you think through that journey, you probably already know who are potential buyers for your product. That's an interesting exercise we go through with some of our founders, is unpacking their industry and targeting potential buyers if that's the route they want to go to, because it's totally different preparing to IPO versus preparing to be bought. And it's actually important to have that target from the beginning, because you'll set up your business in a different way, depending on what your target is.
That's awesome. I love that. You're planning the exit at the beginning.
Definitely.
It's like when we had someone on here, they're talking about real estate. It's like you make your money at the beginning, because at the buy is where you make the money. So similar concept. And so when you look at that, you said something earlier, circling back, you said thought partners. I love that. When he asked you about mentors, you said, well, my thought partners are. And Dre, I was thinking that's a nice t-shirt, thought
Yeah.
partners.
Yes. Yeah.
That's a
Yeah. Yeah.
that's a different way of looking at mentors. And I just love that word. I typed it down here as thought partners. So to be a little not personal, but where's Jenn in 10 years? What is Jenn's 10-year horizon? What's her is she going to have her own private equity fund, VC firm? Is she going to be rivaling Sequoia? Is she going to be doing multinational investment deals with China and the US or Brazil? Have you mapped out 10 years from now for Jenn?
I've mapped out two parts of my 10-year journey, and then, definitely open to see what unfolds in this very dynamic world that we're living in. I'm really captivated by the idea of systemic investing and deploying capital in a way where you're taking into account the different nodes in the network that are part of driving that solution. So one of the things that I find as an improvement opportunity in how we deploy capital in VC is that it's very siloed, right? When I'm looking at an investment decision, I'm saying, for this business in this industry, like, to what extent do I believe that this founder is going to execute and deliver a high returning business, right? But in the world we're living in, like, things are very connected, and you can't actually change an industry or change a system without deploying capital in like a couple of things at a time. So I'm really interested in being a leader in that space and deploying capital in a way where I'm driving systems change and not just one company at a time. So that portfolio level investing, I think, is going to become more and more prevalent as we realize the complexity in the world around us and how you need to do many things at once to drive one outcome. So that would be one thing. And then more broadly, continuing to share my perspectives and helping to drive the thinking for our society. I think there's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of lack of clarity in the world around us and the way we're able to even process what's going on. And I think with some of the experiences I've had and exposure to systems thinking and being able to connect the dots, I want to leverage that in a way where I'm able to help people understand what's happening. One of the recent examples, just to codify it a bit, is with healthcare, right? So a lot of people were talking about our healthcare system as RFK just got his confirmation went through, and he was really focused about the chemicals in our food, the supply chain. And then if you take a step back, there's many, many reasons why we're having poor health outcomes outside of just the quality of our supply chain. So I had a great discussion with a few people to kind of highlight the couple of factors that are at play, right? It's your social connections, because we're having a loneliness epidemic. It's obviously the sedentary lifestyle that most people are living. It's the quality of the food, et cetera. So being able to drive that thinking where people are able to connect the dots a little more effectively and understand things from a systems lens is something I want to do as well in the next 10 years.
Well, that is so fascinating. I like that. One thing before I turn it over to Andre is when you're meeting with the founders and you have that difficult conversation which says, this is a great business, but you're not the right CEO. We need a management change at the E level because your ideal's good, everything's going, but you're just not the guy because you don't have the vision, the passion, the technology. How does that work when you have those conversations? And how do you just buy out the CEO, or is that a different group that handles that? How do you handle those difficult conversations, or when do you know it's at that point where we just got to replace Dre? Why not me? Or we gotta replace Smiley. Why's not you?
I would say the numbers don't lie. So as a venture-backed company, you have to deliver growth consistently. And if we're looking at, the past 6 quarters and the growth targets haven't been hit, your customer base is not growing, you're not converting, the numbers don't lie. So in those instances where leadership has to be changed, that helps, right? So having clarity of how the business has been doing and then being able to tell the story from that lens. And then also having a really good board, because in helping to steer the company, it's never just one VC. It's the full cap table plus whoever's on the board. And I think there's a little bit of a dance in leading the company, taking into account all of those parties, because at the end of the day, it's a people business. And whoever, people have different levels of relationship with the founder to be able to communicate things in a way that makes the most sense. So I would say looking at the trajectory of the business through numbers and whether targets have been hit or not, and then having a really good board to drive the discussion with the founder. But in those instances, I've seen it go both ways, where it's actually gone really well because the founder takes that into account and generally wants the business to succeed and is able to find a better fit and like a better role and still stay with the company. And then obviously sometimes it doesn't go well where they still want to stay on board. But then, there's having a good board is important. So choose them well when you're thinking about that.
Awesome. Makes sense. So let's talk about today and your current role as the head of strategy and chief of staff for the Office of Innovation and Economic Development. What attracted you to that role? And talk to me about the impact you're currently having on the community.
Yeah. Leadership attracted me to the role. So I was, while I was working at SoftBank, I was involved in the Miami tech ecosystem more broadly. And I ran into Mayor Living Cava a few times, just like I heard her speak, and I was struck by her leadership in terms of balancing the economics and the community outcomes, because she comes from a background of a lot of advocacy. Like she started one of the biggest nonprofits in Miami, but then also works really well with the business community. And that's an important, but often it's an important trait to have, but it's often lacking from our leaders. Like you're usually one way or the other. So when the opportunity presented itself, the individual who's leading the team right now is somebody who was involved in venture capital actually prior to joining the county. So that was how that presented itself in terms of an opportunity. And the impact that we're having is bringing more funds, right? So since I joined the county, we were able to bring down $20 million in federal dollars to scale the climate tech hub. So climate is one of the emerging industries in South Florida, and we were able to bring together all the key stakeholders to drive this industry forward and then get federal support to continue to scale that work. And helping to drive more efficiency within government. So the fact that myself and then the individual who leads the team as well come from a venture private sector background has been super helpful to bring a different mindset into how local government operates and really do things differently. So the timeline is an interesting thing because we want things to happen really fast, like in BC, right? Like a quarter is a long time. So it's been interesting to see the impact we're having and just how we operate and to kind of push the thinking towards generating impact in less time and not looking at 2-year timelines. It's like, what can we do in 90 days? So those have been some interesting outcomes just reflecting on the past year and a half.
Sure. So that begs two questions. One is, you mentioned you were able to pull down $20 million from the federal government. And this current climate that we're in, how do you stay nimble, right? Because there's a lot of unexpected that's happening right now.
Yes, to say it lightly.
What sort of pivots have you guys had to do recently or are planning to do just to make sure you're able to still achieve your objectives?
I think it's just being really clear on what outcomes you're trying to generate and being able to tie those outcomes to different stakeholders in a way that is authentic. So if you look at the work we're doing with resilience, it's about protecting our people and property, right? Like South Florida is very susceptible to extreme weather in the form of flooding, in the form of hurricanes. And if you present that narrative in a way that targets what everyone cares about, I think you're still able to deliver the same outcomes. So that's something we're very cognizant of, right? Like there's $3 trillion of assets at risk if sea level does rise. and Miami is not ready to absorb those changes. So being able to present the facts in that way, where, nobody wants all of the condos and, mansions in the coast of Miami to sink. So there's a way you can present the facts that actually targets what everyone cares about, without getting into nitty gritty. So we're just staying cognizant of what outcomes we're trying to drive and what really matters to most people to stay focused on doing the work.
So essentially, focus on the outcomes that you are seeking or hoping to achieve, and then using language, right, that speaks to everyone without having it seem like you're, on one side or the other. That makes sense. The follow-up question, I'll pass over to Smiley after this. So what's the method that you all use to get this money out to those entrepreneurs that are, business owners, small business owners? What's the pathway?
Yeah, there's 3 different pathways that we've crafted so far, but it's definitely, I'm sure there's more to come. One is technical assistance. So specifically, there's one technology that we're looking to scale it's advanced building materials, clean concrete, and a way to apply ultra high performance concrete. So generally in like advanced building materials section. And there's a lot of small businesses involved in pouring concrete in South Florida. So there's some training that needs to be done to say, hey, now we have different types of concrete that are at play that will be used in our buildings. And these are the additional skills you need in order to operate with this new product. So directly delivering technical assistance to small businesses to make sure they're prepared for those changes. Also bringing pilots and demonstration projects to life. When you're commercializing new technology, you need to prove that when it's applied in the real world, it's actually delivering the outcomes that you're saying it's going to deliver. So in this space, it's super important to have pilots and have demonstrated success before you're able to get more customers. So that's something we're doing. And then third would be workforce development. So in order for these industries to grow, you need to make sure that you have people that have the skills to work with these new technologies. So we have a great partner in Miami Tech Works who's actually building the talent pipeline and working with employers to the workforce development that's needed in order to grow these industries.
I think you mentioned this. So you're concentrated only in Miami, or is it the Miami, Fort Lauderdale, that whole West South Florida area, or is it just Miami proper?
It's South Florida as a region. So the risk and resilience work we're doing with the technologies like concrete I mentioned, it's Monroe County, Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach.
No, those are fascinating initiatives. My interest is in private equity because Dre and we have friends who are in that space. They're in California. So we're always on the side. But this is one it's a normal day, like Shark Tank. You just have people come in, pitch ideas to you, you beat them up, or you say, yeah, that's good, and you go to the next one,
that's awful. I hate that idea. I love it.
What's a normal day? Like, I'm a founder, I meet you, you're interested, you're like, okay, come into my office with your pitch deck.
So I would do while I was at SoftBank and then now. So in VC, it definitely was more like that. Like when we would have intros with founders, there was always, the assessment happening in the background. Like, would we want to continue this investment discussion or like not so much? So it felt a little bit more like we're deciding, we're in the Shark Tank room, so to speak. From the local government perspective now, it's a little less Shark Tanky vibes. We do get approached and have the opportunity to meet a lot of businesses from the perspective of like, how can we work with government? What partners can you connect us to access more resources here locally? So there still is this exchange where we're able to support. But from our perspective, we want everyone to win because the more businesses, the more jobs, the more revenue locally. So the incentives are a little different in how we're operating. So I feel like I can give more resources from this side of things.
Nice. So with AI, literally in every area of our lives now. I went to Checkers the other day. I took my mom's there. We get to the drive-through and it's AI talking to us. I'm thinking, okay, it's just the initial interaction. I took the whole order, answered all our questions. My mom's was blown. She was like, well, what? I don't like all this new technology. How come I can speak to a person? But anyway, I digress. AI, Jenn, how is that how are you guys leveraging AI in what you're doing today?
Yeah, in local government, we're really thinking about driving better outcomes for our residents, and then being able to do things faster and more cost effectively. So we're thinking about data management, right? Like, as for the government, we manage a lot of information about resources that needs to be deployed as quickly and as simply as possible. So thinking through those interfaces and how we could streamline the way we're sharing information. Internally, thinking about optimizing a lot of workflows. So we have, processes like procurement and permitting that are really core services for the business community locally. So thinking through how AI can make that go faster for our residents and our businesses. And then more broadly, I think there's still a big question around governance, around risk management that we're thinking through. At the federal level, state, local government has an interesting role in the deployment of AI, where we're kind of the ones that have to manage the opportunity, but also manage the risk, because the private sector is not incentivized to do so, right? And that's not the role they play in society. So I think we're still balancing, how do we capture the benefits of using AI, save money, save time, do it better, while also taking into account the risks, because we're delivering, services like water and sewer. Like, that can't break. It's not the same as doing a chat, like a customer service chat, and versus like delivering the water and sewer that someone needs in their home. So there's a certain risk tolerance, and balancing that is something that we're navigating through now, and I think all government entities are as well.
I wish we had more time, because I was so intrigued with the venture capital stuff. I forgot that you had AI when Dre talked about you in the beginning. You mentioned AI, but before we go into Final Four, are there any questions we should have asked, or something that you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, one thing that I think a lot about is the connection economy, and it's kind of related to the systemic investing space, but just to put it on the table, I think the way we facilitate connections between people is super important, and it's going to become increasingly more important as we have like more and more options. So thinking about how we understand the value of connection and the value of connectors is something that I'm really interested in, and I'm going to keep unpacking over time. Like, we all know those people that are good networkers and like know who's the right person to connect someone to. And as information proliferates in our society, that skill is going to become more and more important. So I'm really interested in the economics of that, and how do we understand and quantify the value of connectors to build economic systems around that, because those are one of the skills that we're going to need more and more of as AI scales.
Yeah, it's almost like a human LinkedIn, versus everyone is like courageous connecting on LinkedIn, but we could be walking and sitting next to each other on the plane and not even know that we're connected, because we just don't engage and have that physical conversation or the physical connections.
Yeah.
I have a question about connections, but Jenn, I think you're about to say something too. Go ahead if you're about to say something.
Yeah, just from the human connection, it's quality over quantity, right? Like, time is so scarce. So it's so different being connected to someone who you just click with. And it's a very authentic and high quality engagement versus having 3,000 followers on LinkedIn. So I think driving high quality connections is super important. And it's actually what delivers the quality of life improvements that I think we're all looking for to some extent.
Yeah. So actually, now I have two questions. High quality connection, right? How do you define it?
Well, it's a bit of a je ne sais quoi, I was listening to John O'Donohue's last interview the other day. I think he passed away in 2008. And he was talking about the feeling you get when you're just having a really good conversation with someone, and how, when you look back at the conversation, you're like playing back some of the moments. And it's like, how do you quantify? How do you quantify having a really good connection with another person? I mean, I think having similarities is one part of it, but maybe having alignment in your values and how you look at the world. But then you could still have good connection with someone who you have completely different views with. So that's kind of something I want to keep unpacking and thinking through, because I think human connection is at the core of what we have to get better at to really live in a world that is a little bit better for everyone as AI scales. We've kind of lost our art there.
Yeah, and here's my last question. I'll pass it to Smiley. So I know you're on the speaking circuit. I've seen you all over the internet. Are you only in the Miami area? And if someone wanted you to come speak at their conference, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
No, I'm not just in the Miami area. I've spoken at crypto conferences and different things in New York, Boston. So not just in Miami, but just email me and we can explore from there.
Sounds good.
Dre, she said private equity, venture capital. She said China. She said Sequoia. She said AI. And now she said crypto. And we gotta bring her back. I mean, we could do the whole show on crypto. I'm just like, wow,
it's like your long lost cousin.
yeah, I wasted all this time on venture capital, and we could have been talking about XRP. What the hell?
Yeah.
Oh man.
XRP had a good run in December.
Yeah, I was like, there's so much we could have unpacked here, but Dre didn't even notice. I was about to get a part-time job at the local warehouse so I could put all the proceeds into my XRP before and XLM and all this stuff before it blows up. But well, anyway, we're getting ready to move into the final four. Dre?
All right, so that's the time for from some high-end technology. Here we go. It would just blow your mind there, Jenn, with all that technology.
We just learned how to do that, so we're super stoked. But
I love it. I love it.
So, alive or dead, who would you want to spend 24 hours with and why?
James Baldwin.
James Baldwin. Why?
Yeah.
He has a way with words. And I think the way we leverage language to express ourselves is super important. And he was a master at that.
Love that. What never fails to make you laugh?
That's a good question. My sister. The way she always says things, she always has like a dark humor.
Okay.
So the way she processes things, I would say dark humor never fails to make me laugh.
Okay.
And what would you say is your greatest risk that you've ever taken?
Being on the Dre Smiley podcast.
The greatest risk I've taken is deciding to become a mother.
Yeah. It's one of the most, both Smiley and I are dads, one of the most rewarding jobs ever. What's something you wish you were better at?
Time management. I get very captivated in doing the work and in exploring ideas. And now that I'm balancing like so many different things, just adhering to time blocks, I would say.
Jenn, this has been phenomenal. It's like, let's say a nice flower, because each layer we pull a petal, there's another petal of intrigue with the VCs, the cryptocurrencies, and your nonprofit. So I want to thank you for being on the being your authentic self.
Yeah.
My pleasure. Looking forward to the crypto episode.
Oh, awesome. Thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you.